very early. This whole story behind that of in '94 learning what an IP address was, which was,
Wow.
but I still remember the moment kind of thing. Um, and I think anytime there's a new technology shift, you get a lot of excitement about it, understandable, and people see the opportunity of, well, what if, and then so a lot of capital comes in, a lot of entrepreneurs come in, and in that case, in contrast to this, the U.S. actually did provide regulatory clarity, and in '96 passed the Telecom Deregulation Act, which provided a whole bunch of structure for Al Gore to invent the internet. That's a joke, sorry. uh, but I think that you had all this capital come in, and it kind of, frankly, the excitement got ahead of the reality. Let's be honest. Certainly that was true in the internet space, and you had the boom and then an aggressive bust. And I think there are aspects of that in crypto that have been similar. You saw, I mean, you guys have all been around this space for a while, and you certainly saw, kind of an ICO craze, an NFT craze. And that isn't to say that ICOs don't have some potential substance, or NFTs don't have some potential substance. So that the excitement got ahead of the reality, and you go through these boom bust cycles. It to me feels different than the internet directly, but I think the excitement about how these technologies can be applied to make financial systems more efficient, certainly where Ripple's focused, and people should be excited about that, but doing that at kind of a moderated pace as to what change management, particularly for risk averse financial institutions, is something that we have to be thoughtful about. But it's one of the reasons why I'm exceptionally excited about the next 10 years, because I think a lot of foundation has been laid, and I'm sure there'll be other cycles along the way here, but overall I'm excited.
Do you feel like crypto already had its bust then, with what has happened in the past administration and all the cycles and everything in between?
I mean, the short answer is yes, meaning, so I joined Yahoo kind of at the end of 2002, and people forget, but like Amazon also went out of business. Yahoo, I mean, people won't be, Yahoo suffered later on, but like this was a dark time in the world of the internet. Like, and now Amazon is what, I don't know how many trillions. I can't keep track, but
Big.
One of the most valuable
biggest,
companies in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think the crypto blockchain ecosystem has gone through a couple of dark moments. I'm not going to be brazen enough to predict we won't have other dark moments. But I would like to imagine that we have seen the worst of it, because I think each one we kind of emerge a little bit stronger, a little bit smarter. I think, look, I think frankly, even some of the less good actors get weeded out. And I think that happened in the internet space. I mean, there are definitely charlatans in their 97, 98, 99. They get washed out. And by the way, some of them did go to jail, right?
Yeah.
Like that happened. And now we've seen that in crypto. And I think, as much as I don't want to see that in any industry, that we've seen this movie before. And, if you think about how the internet ended, it took, so from 97 to today is 28 years. Okay, so if crypto was born circa 2010, 28 years, so that's 2038.
Yeah.
We got
Okay.
a lot. We got
All
a
right.
lot of growth.
I think that's better than a price prediction for Bitcoin. I like that. When have we made it? 2038. I like the analogy a lot because, we're fond of saying like Chewy is really just like pets.com with like better infrastructure, like more capital, right? Like
Webvan.
Yeah.
I mean, Webvan was a heralded I mean, the number of billions that went into that thing. The CEO of Accenture went to run it, and there was so much excitement. Wrong place, wrong time. And now we've got 4 Webvans between DoorDash and everything else.
Yeah. And I want to get back to what you guys are building now at Ripple, but more recent events, you were very vocal about being critical of your treatment under the SEC of the last administration. I'm going to misquote you a little bit. I think it was something like ambiguity creates the guise of power, something like that. It was a great quote.
I liked that one. I can't remember. It wasn't quite that.
It wasn't quite that. But so, you guys fought the fight, you went through and you got vindicated by the court. One of the few under the last administration to actually get some vindication from the judiciary. Now that sort of era is over, where do you see Ripple going just with this new kind of regulatory clarity? And I'm sure that has a lot to do with the way you guys are building now.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost shocking. And Ellie and I were talking this a little before we got started. 1 year ago today, we happened to be sitting here, in an election week. 1 year ago today, Ripple was still being sued by the SEC. That we had won, but then they were appealing. The crypto market and certainly XRP was perhaps had some downward pressure on it from that regulatory dynamic. And so I think, it's around 40 or 50 cents. Today it's, I think, 2.25, something like that. You can't really overstate how profound that change has been. Now, you could also say people forget before the SEC lawsuit, before the SEC came in kind of, in my opinion, artificially manipulated a market, XRP was the second most valuable digital asset. Today it's fourth or fifth, around there. And, I think that creates, a challenge for the XRP ecosystem and community to keep building and, demonstrating how these technologies can be applied in ways that create demand and velocity for the asset. So, I mean, I don't think I can overstate how much has changed. I mean, you're exactly right. One of the things, I believe we're on the dawn of another positive wave. And I think that's driven by the simple reality. The largest economy in the world went from being pretty darn hostile towards crypto to pretty darn friendly towards crypto. And so you have 22% of global GDP just flip-flopped. And yes, markets have generally done well in the last year, but I think they still appreciate how much that largest economy shift means. This morning, Adina Friedman was on stage, CEO of NASDAQ, with Monica Long, Ripple's president. And, she talked about the banks are still nervous. And the banks in the United States don't yet have the clarity they want to fully lean in. Now, stable coins, I think they would say, yes, the Genius Act provides that codified clarity. But there's other pieces of this that, because the Clarity Act is stymied, you guys are probably more experts on the status of that than me. But I think the big banks are still nervous. And again, back to what's changed. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I personally was debanked. That's like, this is an example of weaponizing. And there's like, a lot of the conspiracy theorists I read, and it's like, well, that actually did happen. That's not a conspiracy theory. Like, I was the recipient of that.
Yeah. I remember a lot of those kind of Nick Carter moments on Twitter. Like, I was right. Like, you guys thought I was. Yeah. It's a very interesting time. Yeah.
But you've come such a long way in the last year. I mean, since sitting down with you at Swell in Miami, where we talked about all that stuff. Right. I'm just going to rattle off some things that Ripple has done in the last year. So buckle up. You guys launched a stablecoin. You acquired a payments platform, a treasury software provider, 2 custody platforms, and a prime broker, applied for a national bank charter and a Fed master account. Does this mean Ripple ultimately wants to become a full-service financial institution? And if not, what's the long-term vision for Ripple now?
It's a good question. I mean, look, it is, as we said, profound how much has changed. Ripple has, I think, in a happy way, always focused on a particular segment, and that is really on the infrastructure side. Mm-hmm. There are temptations that we have had along the way of entering other segments. Some interesting consumer applications that I've found interesting. And frankly, look, the exchanges have done well. Coinbase has done well. Kraken's done well. Binance has done well. We have resisted the temptation to kind of move into some of those segments to stay very much in the blockchain infrastructure for businesses, for financial institutions. I will say, there's a whole bunch of things we've done that I'm very excited about, but I think, again, people underappreciate how consequential acquisitions like Hidden Road, which is now Ripple Prime. These guys cleared $3 trillion of transactions last year. And when you think about how, where some in crypto, I think, are looking at, I'm going to buy other crypto companies. If you look at Ripple's behavior, we're actually saying, well, we want to be the bridge between traditional finance and the decentralized finance world. So we're the decentralized finance piece. We're going to acquire things that are traditional finance. Hidden Road was kind of 80% non-crypto related. G Treasury is 100% non-crypto related, processing trillions of dollars of payment transactions. And so the opportunity to bring over 1,000 corporate treasurer offices, managing hundreds of billions of dollars of, dormant cash, and thinking about how you apply that with stable coins. I think I'm incredibly excited by, where we have found ourselves in that journey. And I think, next year, I will say, I think we'll be much less acquisitive. We've been busy this year on the M&A front. And I think it's kind of like, okay, we got some work to do to integrate and to demonstrate the strategy that we see as I just kind of articulated. And okay, let's weave these pieces together.
Yeah. On the front of Ripple Prime, you obviously acquired Hidden Road, and that went live, I believe, on Monday.
Yeah, well, pieces of so now that Hidden Road is now Ripple Prime,
Yes.
and we operate all as one licensing regime. There's things that Hidden Road can do in the United States that they couldn't do before, and so they now are clearing XRP as well as RLUSD in the US, which because of licensing stuff. And now that we're kind of one big happy family, we can do that.
Yeah. So Ripple Prime will route institutional trades through OTC desks rather than just the open market. How do you kind of see that influencing XRP's price and the liquidity of it all?
I have always, and I don't, people think I just dodge questions about price. I sort of, yes.
Answer the question.
Yeah.
I dodge questions about price.
Yeah. It's like, look, the whole crypto industry, I do take a macro view, and I think, is crypto going to do better? And there's a great stat that came out. I saw somebody post a Halloween stat, the price of Bitcoin every Halloween for the last, 12 years or something. It was really a good, interesting one. And yes, it took a dip here and there, but like, the up and to the right was profound. And look, Bitcoin is the lead that the crypto industry follows. And so when I think about price, I think about the industry more so than I do one asset. Now, what I do think about, though, for Ripple's products and certainly other participants in the XRP ecosystem is the liquidity of XRP and liquidity of XRP against different assets. That's super important. It's super important for the products we deliver because tight spreads mean better pricing. And, we of course care about that. Now, how do all these things correlate is like, what's the most liquid and how does that correlate with price? And, PhDs in economics will debate that more effectively than I will and still disagree. So I'll dodge the rest of that.
We'll get the PhDs to come.
Yeah. Well, I am curious. I want to follow up on the liquidity question a little bit, because obviously you guys have been very active, or other folks have been very active launching like public market vehicles that have exposure to Ripple. There's like sort of the DAT craze of this summer. US futures, perps are coming. How do you think about this exposure to the public markets and how that affects Ripple?
Let me push on the question a little bit. The first part you're talking about, I didn't follow the first part.
Like digital asset treasuries.
So the treasuries we have
ETFs,
supported.
and then the US futures piece as well.
Yeah, what I thought you were touching on, there's a little drama, which I know some of you followed, linked to as a secondary market transaction. I don't know if is that what you were asking about?
No. I was just asking about public market exposure for Ripple. How do you think about that?
Okay, so Ripple as a private company has chosen to stay private, in that most companies that go public, one of the primary reasons is to raise capital. We haven't needed to raise capital. We've been in a strong position on the balance sheet to be able to do everything from tender offers to our existing shareholders, provide some liquidity, to also the acquisitions that we have already covered. So it's not been a priority to get public, because it's a little bit like, okay, how does that help us achieve our goals? And again, as Adina Friedman on stage this morning was talking about, that there's a high hurdle in terms of the cost of being a public entity, and how that actually could slow you down and cause more friction than help. Now, that being said, I think providing institutional access to digital assets, whether that be XRP, Solana, ETH, Bitcoin, I think that's good. Like, that's in terms of bringing a new segment of both retail and institutional investors and give them exposure to an asset class they might be interested in. The reality is most institutions, if you look at as a percentage, more than half have zero exposure to crypto. And the ones that do, the average, I think, is like 0.8% or something. Like, it's de minimis. And so when you ask me why I'm optimistic about the future, that would be some data that makes me optimistic about the direction of travel. Ripple has gotten behind one particular XRP digital asset treasury called Evernorth, which was publicly announced its launch. The CEO is a gentleman named Ashish Birla, who used to be an executive at Ripple. And I think we'll get behind other XRP digital asset treasuries. We want kind of class A, very well managed, very compliant, and I think those are good to have out there.
Bitcoin might sound complicated, but the Gemini credit card makes it simple. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. No annual fee, and right now you can grab a $200 Bitcoin intro bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stash. Go to gemini.com/CIA to learn more. Terms apply. Brad, there's been a debate recently on crypto Twitter. I'm sure you've seen some of it play out about XRP's use case now that Ripple does have RLUSD as its stablecoin, and you're branching out from cross-border payments into other areas.
Yeah.
You recently did say in a tweet, XRP sits at the center of everything Ripple does. Can you kind of explain what you meant by that?
Well, I think I don't understand this, but well, first of all, I think we can all agree there's a lot of misinformation and sometimes disinformation in crypto Twitter.
Yeah.
That's not great for anybody. I sometimes think people like to paint a picture that is somehow like Ripple's given up on XRP.
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, for a whole bunch of reasons. I mean, one is
Clear it up.
well, for me, that tweet was trying to like, let's just be very clear. When we think about, and as I said earlier, when we think about G Treasury, okay, so Ripple wants to be as a treasury management infrastructure player, we now can introduce things like Ripple payments. Ripple payments, some of those go through stablecoins, some of them goes through XRP. And that depends upon corridor, that depends upon currency pair, we want to deliver the best possible product to a customer at the best price. And sometimes that may be a stable coin, sometimes it may not. And people, I mean, frankly, something that's not widely known for your audience, there was a period of time where Ripple was minting in 2023, first part of 2023, Ripple was minting 20% of all USDC. That's because we were doing institutional payment flows and we used USDC. We also used USDT. We also used XRP. I don't look at the world and say, well, we are not XRP maximalists. There's going to be different chains for different solutions and different technologies. I think we have to start, and I mean this when I say we, I mean the whole crypto industry has to start with what problem and for what customer are we solving? Mm-hmm. If we just try to, it's like, hey, I have a technology and I just want to apply it to a customer. It's like, well, a customer doesn't think about it that way. A customer has a problem. How do we apply the right technologies? Yeah. XRP is very scalable, very fast, and very inexpensive on a per transaction basis. That makes it good for some things and probably less good for other things. That's okay. And Ripple will use other technologies in those situations. But if Ripple can go from managing tens of billions of dollars of payment transactions to hundreds of billions of dollars of payments transactions to trillions of dollars, and if XRP doesn't have 100% of that pie, but the pie is growing very quickly, like that's great. I'm happy. That's a really good place to be.
Mm-hmm. So do you kind of see? Does that clear it up, Ellie?
Oh, it clears it up. Right. We'll see what the XRP. Do we call them Army anymore? I don't know. Community.
We tried to rebrand family.
Okay. We'll see what they say.
But you know what?
It's more peaceful time.
I kind of come around to I love the XRP Army. We have. I mean, look, we were attacked, and I don't just mean by the SEC. Like there are those who are maximalists of their particular religion. I respect that as long as people are being kind of like constructive and honest and not spreading disinformation. I'm like, okay, fair enough. We can disagree. I try genuinely to support, and I think the whole industry benefits if we kind of get behind the whole industry instead of fighting about how big my piece of the pie is. Let's think about how big the pie is.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting because the XRP family, community, whatever we want to call it, is extremely loyal, and they're very vocal as well. And a lot of communities out there or token issuers wish they could create that. What do you think kind of started that and caused it? And like, what have you contributed to it or Ripple as a whole?
Yeah. By the way, I think this is a great question. I wish I could point to here's an answer.
I'm curious as well, honestly.
Well, look, unfortunately, you're not going to get a great answer because I don't know. And I think
there should be studies on this.
Yeah.
There probably it's a fascinating, like in terms of, I went to Harvard Business School. You do case studies about things. Like it would be fascinating. And I don't have a precise answer. I do think the psychology of the, people like to be part of the underdog. They want to support the underdog. And almost from the beginning, Ripple took a slightly contrarian view around crypto. XRP took a non-proof of work framework for how to validate transactions. That was controversial. That was contrarian. The distribution method was controversial and contrarian. The choice of deciding, hey, we're going to partner with banks. I mean, used to people would call XRP the bank coin. Those were all things that were contrarian at the time. Then you get attacked by, some of the existing players. You get attacked by the SEC, and it has made a resilient group. And I think, look, Ripple has tried, and I think this was, even today, is still a little contrarian. Ripple has always tried to be extremely transparent about our role within the XRP ecosystem, how much XRP we own. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that, frustratingly, the SEC used against us. Like we were the most transparent. The SEC demands transparency. Some cryptos aren't transparent at all. We're transparent, and the SEC uses that against us to sue us. You're like,
so like come in and register and leave with a Wells notice. There's
a lot of stuff that was super frustrating about that. It just doesn't feel like that chapter of that institution and our government was acting in good faith. Yeah. I think people, I don't know if I've shared a lot of this, but like I personally went into the SEC. I didn't go with lawyers because I was just talking about how we're using our technologies. Not once did anyone suggested that these are securities, but you go in over years and you're talking about what you're doing. Not once did someone say to me, hey, we think XRP might be a security. You might want to change how you're doing things. And then years later to sue not just Ripple, but to sue me personally, because to sue someone personally, it has to be, I knowingly, right. I knew that it was a security and behaved that way anyway. And it's like, well, you didn't even know if it was a security, and that was just bullying. Yeah. I mean, luckily Ripple's in a position and we had the fortitude to kind of fight that fight. But that's not how our government should partner in any circumstance, I don't think.
Have you guys had, in this sort of regime change, because you launched so many licensed or TradFi adjacent products, have you guys had good interactions with the task force, Chair Atkins, Hester Cruz, all those folks? Like, what have those conversations been like?
I mean, again, kind of the mind-bending experience. I'll give you kind of two quick anecdotes. So as I said, I'd gone into the SEC's offices multiple times prior to the lawsuit. And then for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, did not. We were invited back to speak to the task force. It was a little bit surreal to go back in, but I'll tell you, the task force could not have been more welcoming, constructive, open, genuinely intellectually interested and curious in some of our perspectives, given our experience. And to some degree that culminated, Paul Atkins, after taking a seat, reached out to me and it was like, hey, I'd love to, just chat. And, to me, that like we should have a government who, by the way, I'm not even sure if Paul Atkins and I agree on everything, but like, I mean, nothing came up that we disagreed on that I know of, but like, but the fact that he was interested in meeting, I think, it's just a night and day difference as opposed to being afraid of government. We couldn't get meetings with anybody in government for years. And then you have the new chair kind of reaching out and be like, hey, we can learn from each other here.
We're still waiting on, quite a few details actually from Senate Ag and Senate Banking committees on this Market Structure Clarity Act, whatever they're going to call it, in terms of what they're thinking when they're going to classify commodities and securities. I think it's pretty clear, though, that in terms of projects that don't have firm commodity status, there's going to be a lot more disclosure requirements required. You talked about how Ripple is transparent, but for, I think projects beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's probably going to be a case of like just disclosing more, right? Do you think there's enough disclosure going on in this space for consumers? And would you be in favor of, disclosing more for consumers?
So I have a couple thoughts about this. I mean, the first thought I have when I hear this question is you have to remember Ripple's in a unique position and the XRP ecosystem's in a unique position. XRP has clarity. Now, I want the industry to have clarity because that's good for the industry. And I think if it's good for the industry, it's good for Ripple. XRP has clarity. And so we're not going to support any bill that actually disadvantages where we already have a federal court saying XRP is not a security. Why would we support something that somehow calls that back into question? And I mean, hypothetically, a new Gary Gensler comes in and runs the SEC and I've got to spend another $150 million fighting a lawsuit. Like that, we can't get behind a bill that would put us in a worse position than we spent all this years and time to get to a place So I start with that, and I understand. I mean, there's a lot of different drafts going on, and I've seen some of them, and I don't know how it'll play out, but we will continue to be transparent about how we think about our holdings of XRP. I mean, we're public with what wallets Ripple controls, and people can track that stuff more readily than other projects. And again, I like to support all projects, so I'm not going to pick on any here, but people have chosen to be more clandestine. And even when I remember being interviewed on a panel years ago, and a fellow CEO asking questions like, well, wait a minute, we do share all this, how about you share this? And he didn't want to share that information. You're kind of like, well, wait a minute, like you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. I think, okay, following up on that, the kind of making a whole wrap to the conversation at the beginning, you said, the US has kind of been falling behind on the crypto front, and now maybe might be our chance, going off what Ellie mentioned, the market structure proposals in Congress, comparing it to regulatory frameworks in the EU, UK, Singapore, other countries. Now, will the US become a competitive place for crypto? Do you think so?
Well, I mean, the US has always been a competitive place. I just don't think it has been a leader for these reasons. And again, for 4 years, 80% of Ripple's hiring was outside the United States because it didn't make sense. And I think other companies, you've seen similar dynamics. So I don't want to paint it as that quite dire, but do I think the US can become the crypto capital of the world? Yeah, absolutely. I think it does require the kind of regulatory clarity and certainty to get the largest financial institutions to feel comfortable to lean in, and you're seeing some get more comfortable. Mm-hmm. But I mean, don't we think that someday I'll be able to go on to Fidelity and buy Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Seems like that should already exist.
100%. But so you ask, why doesn't that exist? Yeah. It's this core question. Like Fidelity, even though it seems pretty clear, and even as Ellie described, it seems like the SEC has always agreed that Bitcoin's not a security, but it's like, okay, well, let's just wait.
Mm-hmm.
Question. Besides everything we've discussed today, what's one thing you're watching that others may not be talking as much about and you think others should be paying attention to?